YouTube. I'm excited for this topic today as it is a question that we receive quite often. And actually, I mean, I myself in the past have been thinking about this. Can we spot reduce belly fat or just fat in general? Have you received that question also, Laura? Firstly, welcome. Of course, I'm excited to talk to you.
Yes, it's good to see you. I'm glad that you're kind of in your home environment again, even just temporarily. Hopefully you're settling in okay with the time difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Actually, I have no jet lag this year, which is probably the first time ever. So I'm super excited about that.
I'm impressed. I'm so glad for you. And I'm actually really looking forward to this conversation as well. It's interesting. I still get this question. I was asked this question indirectly again last week. So it still does come up. And it really is, as you mentioned, it's usually the midsection where we get
Hmm.
from females particularly about how can I reduce the belly fat, the midsection, all that sort of stuff. So this is a really good conversation for us to dive into.
Yeah, I think other popular areas would be like love handles or sometimes like jiggly arms, thighs, of course, like cellulite on the butt, which we might get into also. But yeah, just generally speaking, I guess to say it straight off the bat for people to like bring it to the point, no, we cannot spot reduce belly fat. We cannot target and just say like, hey, calorie deficit, go and
Mhm.
target our belly. But what we can do, and that I think is sometimes what people are asking, is also we can spot shape certain
Yeah.
body parts through exercise, and then of course we need to expose them through nutrition. So there are various ways that we're going to talk about how we can do that, but that's just to like answer the question straight off the bat. We're not going to be talking for 30 minutes and then get a cliffhanger. I just want to say that technically, or like from a sheer physiological point of view, no, we cannot do that. Even if you wear a waist trainer, even if you feel like you sweated more in that particular area and you wrap yourself in cling film or whatever it's called, to sweat more in that area, it doesn't work that way.
Unfortunately, nope, it does not. Nope.
So I guess, yeah, let's talk how we can indeed turn quote unquote fat into muscle. So as I said, we cannot actually do that directly, but what can we do instead? Sometimes we don't see people for a really long amount of time and then we're like, whoa, how did that happen? Or, we think like I actually like my thighs being bigger, but I know that's mostly fat and I actually want them to be muscle. Like, how do we turn that straight into muscle? What would be some strategies to go about that?
Okay. This is a bit of a loaded question because it really, and I always revert back to this, it's very individual. There are a few ways that you can do this. It depends on how do they have any experience training? Do they, right? So then we can head in that direction. What is their nutrition like? As you've pointed out, it can be, do we want to build muscle and then, kind of reduce the body fat? Or do you want to reduce the body fat and gain muscle afterwards? So, and both you and we work with a lot of women and I want to lose body fat. I want to lose body fat and I want to have some definition. I want to be toned, quote unquote toned. So how do we bridge the gap so that we can give them what they want while also encouraging them to work towards gaining more muscle and strength? So if I have a newbie who is coming to me and they don't have much experience in the gym, I say, okay, so there is a good possibility with, since you don't have very much training experience, let's get you to do more strength training. Let's relinquish some of the cardio. I'm not saying all of it. Let's just relinquish some of the cardio. Let's transfer some of that energy into strength training, hypertrophy. Let's get the blood pumping to your muscles. Let's grow some of that muscle tissue, and you can develop some of that the tone that you're looking for, along with improving your nutrition. So, and I say improving because this could mean a deficit. This could mean maintenance. We may not even know if this is a total newbie And if we just switch their macronutrients, I know that you've run into this. Let's incorporate more protein. Let's balance out those carbohydrates and fats and see what happens over the next 3 months. And then that will gauge how your body responds because genetics, I know that that's something that we're probably going to talk about, they play a role as well.
Absolutely. No, I love that you mentioned for newbies it's a little bit different. And for newbies, I mean, we can define that maybe as in like first year of training or so, or someone who
Yeah.
has never had been eating in a higher protein diet. So love that you said that for everyone else. So that's option number one, right? If we're trying to quote unquote turn fat into muscle as a person newer to strength training, that is actually possible simultaneously. Obviously, still not directly fat into muscle, but you can build up the muscle while you're reducing the fat. The Let's just say overall, the longer you have been training, the more familiar you are with macro tracking, and the cleaner your diet already is, the lower your chances of body recomping at simply calorie maintenance or even in a cut. So therefore, for those people, we always recommend periodizing your nutrition, meaning going in a intentional muscle gaining phase and then a cut, or a cut and then a gaining phase. And for most people, as you mentioned, they come to us when they're already feeling uncomfortable. So more often than not, we'll start with a cut, which, like, if they're already strength training properly and everything else, like if they haven't been in that endless dieting cycle on top of everything else. But more often than not, it pays off to start in a cut so that the person feels more confident, so that they feel better in their clothes, in just their skin, and then saying, "Hey, okay, we've stripped some of the belly fat. You're kind of looking quote unquote skinny fat, because that is what happens if you strip the fat and there's not enough muscle. You look a little bit deflated. So now you have perhaps even reached your goal weight, but you're still not content. You're looking differently. So what we have to do is now actually shape. So we can spot shape. So we can work on those abs, on those glutes, on more defined arms, on, giving you a nice quote unquote, as you said, toned body, and then going into a gaining phase, and then sometimes afterwards, because we might put on a little bit of fat in the process of that again, but after that maybe going into another mini cut, and then you're like ready to maintain, if that's where you're at. Or the other way around, if someone comes to us and they have been dieting for a really long time perhaps, and they're just like, their hormones are compromised and they're just in a better place to go into a gaining phase, mentally, maybe not even so stressed about certain weight or whatever else, then it definitely pays off to do it that way around. But yeah, just for people listening, keep those three types in mind. Generally speaking, fat loss, then muscle gain, or muscle gain then fat loss. Or for people newer to strength training and higher protein, generally speaking, we can also try to do both at the same time, perhaps at maintenance calories. um,
I'm really glad that I sorry, Ginger. I'm really glad that you pointed out that, they're encouraged, they see the scale moving down, they're losing weight, and then they're still not really happy with their body. Women, I'm speaking to you, it is extremely difficult to gain muscle. You are not going to get bulky. I don't guarantee a lot. I don't promise a lot. I pretty much almost guarantee that you will not get bulky. And it's still a question that I get regularly, and it's kind of sad to me. We don't have the testosterone that men do. So I just took a sidestep on what you were mentioning, but I just feel like it's really
no,
important
I
to
love it.
mention that yes, you're going to shed body fat, and along some of that might also be your muscle tissue as well, because you're in a calorie deficit. You have lack of energy, so it's going to grab from whatever you want. So there's that possibility as well. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that because it reveals a lot.
Yeah, and honestly, it's happened so many times where people have this specific goal weight in mind, and they're like, I want to get to this weight. I looked amazing. I felt amazing when I was, I don't know, 20 years old, blah, blah, blah. I want to fit in my jeans with this weight, blah, blah. And then we get to the weight and they're like, why is my butt still flabby,
Mhm.
and why don't I like the way that I look? Well, exactly for the reasons that you mentioned. So, yes, do not be scared of strength training. Please, please, please. But one thing that is often unfortunate with not just with strength training, but also with just generally going through a fat loss phase, we often lose the areas that we do like also. So particularly as women, we might be blessed with a bit more of an upper area than perhaps I am. But with more strength training, with fat loss, you're probably also going to lose a little bit of that. And there's nothing you can do about that in particular either. It's not like you can spot keep belly fat either, or not belly fat, but body fat, right? Okay, I'd like to keep my fat in my glutes and actually on my boobs, but everything else can go.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not how it works. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I wished upon the glute gods that my glutes would hang tight, but they just, for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. But that's okay.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. And I mean, when it comes to particular areas, also, unfortunately, the lower belly, not just the belly, but the lower belly in particular, really is the most stubborn area, and that absolutely just makes what you want to call it, like a sense in the sense in terms of us surviving, because right, our body wants to keep us safe, particularly our reproductive hormones. And so or not hormones, organs, and they're obviously more in the lower belly area. So this is when we're stressed, when we have high cortisol levels, when we have all kinds of high stress. So even if that's work stress, if that's emotional stress, if that's too long in a deficit, too much exercise, your body is more likely to hold on to belly fat then. So that is a really, really important point to make when people say, "Hey, I specifically want to get rid of that lower belly fat," or when they're at the tail end of the diet and they maybe say, "I'm so happy with everything, but there is still that little extra layer on my lower belly." It's more likely than anything to be due to high cortisol. So that's the main recommendation I would give there, to focus on stress management more than anything else.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you started to hone in on that particular area, and I have a few additions to that as well. So as moms, a lot of us could still have diastasis recti, and this
Mhm.
could be 3 months postpartum, 3 years, 30 years. And realistically, that can push the belly out. So if you do proper training, I'm not saying you can reduce the fat in that area. However, you are able to reconnect your abdominal wall so that there is less of a gaping in that, or if you just think of it physiologically, it does kind of flatten things out. So there is a possibility of that. Again, I'm not saying you can reduce the fat there. It is just like when you're building muscle, it takes up more, like you need more space to put it in there. And it's the same with diastasis recti. And along with what you said, if we have, again, a newer client and you even just shift the macronutrients, they could be reduced bloating. They could reduce, like you said, cortisol. If their sleep is improving, hydration is improving. Those little things could be drivers in reducing some of that belly puffy, bloated. Some of it might be body fat, but most of the time there we have that constant bloating and we don't recognize it until we start eating additional fiber and all those sort of things that can regulate the midsection and on top of the hormonal organs as well.
Yeah, very, very good point. And I mean, speaking of bloating, just in general digestive issues, like for instance, today I actually had a call with one of my clients, and she did have a certain food intolerance test. And while I'm not always a big fan of those, it was helpful for her because she believed in them. And as you and I know, if someone believes in something, even if I say it, it might not have the same credibility as if it's coming from a doctor or what she perceives to be a doctor, right? And so this test told her that she's very, very sensitive to gluten, if not intolerant. And I asked her, "Did you expect that?" Because she has been complaining about like bloating and sometimes at night her stomach being really, really extended and stuff. And she's like, "To be honest, secretly, I knew every time I had bread, I felt like I'm super inflamed." But this test just affirmed it to her. And I was like, "Okay, listen, so now we have it black and white, or, it was red actually, but red on white. Um, Try to minimize, like, at least, well, not necessarily cut it out completely because you're not celiac, but if you have it, if you have, because she said, but bread and pasta is like the two things I love the most in the world. And I said, well, if you have it that once a month or, every couple of weeks, just anticipate that you're going to feel horrible afterwards. That is entirely your choice. You know that the day after you're going to be inflamed. You shouldn't step on the scale, but it is at least now you have a conscious an affirmation that this is what it is, and you just need to make conscious choices. You cannot afterwards complain to me, "Oh, I'm so bloated. I feel like I'm a cow and, my pants don't fit anymore." This is just what you're going to have to deal with. So, my point being, people dealing with food intolerances as opposed to just ignoring them because you love this certain food. And often, like, the funny thing is so often that the thing that we feel like we want the most is actually what your body is intolerant to. So often I have heard the same thing about like dairy and so on. People, oh, but I love my cappuccino. It's like my favorite part of the day. And you're like, we gotta switch to almond milk or something else because it's just not serving us. You're, puffing out. And so again, to your point, it has nothing to do with belly fat, but it pushes the belly out and it
Yeah.
contributes to just an inflamed environment overall that's not conducive to your body wanting to let go of the fat down there.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. And part of that also is, as you mentioned, you omit these foods and then you incorporate it, and you know, kind of in the back of your head, okay, so this is temporary. I
Mhm.
know that the bloating will go down, and over time, the idea is that that will encourage you to make those more nutritious swaps that fit better for your body, and you do learn to enjoy those as well because they kind of satisfy. Maybe it is a craving, maybe it's more about the environment, the the emotions that it brings
Mm.
back. I don't need to veer off track, but it does, making these changes, and this does include the gym. When we're so used to doing all the cardio and then your body just stops responding, it's those changes that are hard initially, but then you start to see the results, and that encourages you. We don't always have motivation. You have the discipline to continue on in that direction.
Absolutely. I love that you said that often it's more of a habit and like the environment than anything. Like particularly, I mean, with bread. Okay, bread tastes good, but often it is even just the smell, like toasted bread and butter, or like you might connect it with a childhood memory where your mom made you some toast with jam or so. And like nowadays, some gluten-free breads actually taste somewhat decent, right? Like, or you can try toasting other things and then getting that same sensation. Of course, like if you're in an Italian restaurant and the bread basket is brought out, that is a good habit to get out of in any case, whether you're gluten free or not. Like not to snack on that on those quote unquote empty carbs, or not empty but naked carbs without any protein or any fat prior. So yeah, a lot of it is habitual for sure. But I mean, talking about inflammation as well, like in order to move things along more in that lower body, I think hydration is another thing that is so helpful. You mentioned fiber, and just generally we said, okay, focusing on the things that are anti-inflammatory, but just making sure we're well hydrated keeps things moving so that we're avoiding constipation and other digestive issues, which can also make us feel more uncomfortable in that lower belly area. Again, not having anything to do with lower belly fat per se, but still moving things along, encouraging our metabolism, encouraging healthy body detox, quote unquote. So that would be another point for me to direct people towards.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight inflammation because what we do is when we break down the muscle tissue, it does actually incur more inflammation in our body, but we want that.
Mm,
That's how the muscle grows. So I'm glad that you put that out. So I'm like talking physiologically. That's how we grow. So we do want some of that inflammation temporarily. It's over time where we want to reduce that inflammation, as you mentioned. Fiber helps to flush it out, hydration, all those sort of things. And then we need the proper building blocks in order to build that muscle. And if your hormones are not great or you have digestive upset, you don't you're not able to absorb the proper nutrients that you need in
mm,
order to build that muscle, which in fact, over time, will burn more body fat. So the more muscle, lean tissue you have, the more energy your body requires in order to maintain that tissue. So the more muscle you have, the more body fat you are actually going to break down over time.
I love that point. It's so true, and people cannot hear that often enough, really. Like in terms of last week in our life, we spoke about metabolism and how it's comprised, or just maybe it was the week prior, I don't remember. But anyway, one of those is obviously our number one basal metabolic rate, and of course, by adding more muscle, your as you mentioned, your body just needs more energy at rest, which means you can eat more, which means like you're just going to be healthier overall. And of course, talking about the aesthetic point, not to speak of that, that you're just gonna look more shaped, but when it comes to more muscle, also, I want to go back to something that I briefly touched on earlier, and that was cellulite. Of
Okay.
course, there's not many people that get cellulite in the belly area, but a lot of people, I mean, myself included, from time to time, in the buttocks area. So, essentially, when we're talking about cellulite, it's nothing else than your muscle, whether you're very muscular or not, but your muscle pushing onto fat that's subcutaneous, so under the skin, and the pushing of it out means that it's kind of showing in like the little dent type thing. So the only way we can really reduce cellulite is by reducing body fat. And by increasing muscle, that doesn't, sometimes it actually makes the appearance at first of the fat without the reduction of the fat a little bit more extreme, because of course you know, like if you picture leggings and you just extend whatever is below, it's going to be a bit fuller. And so the same is what happens with skin. So in those cases, if you want to reduce cellulite, the only way is to reduce body fat overall. You can, you know, do a little bit of a what do you call it, like a scrub thingy, and use all the creams that you want, and they might increase a little bit of a circulation to that area, in terms of blood. But that's gonna be a mover in terms of what you see aesthetically of like 0.01% at best. So your very best bet in terms of eradicating cellulite is literally a calorie deficit and reducing body fat.
Yeah, and unfortunately, transparency, some of genetics too. Like I'm a fairly lean person, and I have a little bit of cellulite under my glutes. And
Yep.
I'm like, well, I'm just gonna embrace it because maybe it just looks like I have bigger glutes, whatever. So there is that factor as well. Some of the things we just are not able to control. And
Exactly.
along this journey of reshaping your body, reducing the body fat, getting that tone, which I don't really like that term, but getting more structure within your muscles. Some of it, you have a lot of control over it. Some of it you don't. So let's learn to embrace where your body's at every step of the journey. And believe me, it's not easy. It's not. It just isn't easy. Sometimes you don't want to go into the gym and lift heavy, and you want to go back to the cardio. And there might be moments in time where you might veer off, and that's okay. Is remembering, okay, why do I really want this? Do I really, really, really want? And maybe you only want a little bit of muscle, and that's okay. It's putting the steps in order to get that.
Yeah, and I guess, just one more thing to add here when it comes to the cardio thing, and sometimes people thinking, "Hey, I'm sweating, that is fat
Yeah.
burning directly." That is absolute, crap. I mean, you are sweating, so yes, you are burning energy, but that's not burning fat directly. So that's still coming from your glucose stores. And yes, of course, eventually, once you cross a certain threshold, energy is also coming from fat, but it's not directly as in like under your skin where you're sweating. This is where the body fat is quote unquote melting. So just to bust that myth, um, that's not a thing. That's not how it works. Again, like we were saying, just to summarize it for you, if you want to get rid of fat, belly fat, any kind of fat, we need to be in a calorie deficit to lose fat, and then ideally we want to build muscle to shape up, or you can shape up first, keeping that fat at first, and then lose the fat through a calorie deficit. Or if you're newer to this, you can do both at the same time at maintenance, or perhaps in a small calorie deficit. You might still be able to build muscle when you're new to strength training and newer to a higher protein diet. But essentially, those are the main ways.
Yes, thank you for laying that out. And I know we're going to say, well, but how long? How long will it take? Oh, baby, I don't know. We can plan to be in a deficit for 3 months, reverse out into maintenance, go into surplus 3 months after that. It could take a year. It could take 2 years. Ideally, we have a progression over time, which a year is a good standardized set of time in order to kind of lay it out so that you have an idea. It's not going to
Mm.
be a quick fix. It just is not. You and I never promise any sort of quick fix because it takes grit and determination, and you really have to be hold in your why of why you want to do this over the extended period of time.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Holding on to the why. That's the an awesome message. And yeah, like you say, it really depends how much body fat you have to lose. I love a periodization of like 3 months of a cut, half a year of a gaining phase, 3 months of maintaining, or the other way around. If you have a lot to lose and you're newer to this, you can also cut for 6 months and then maintain for a little bit and not necessarily going into a gaining phase. It really, really depends. Point being, periodize your nutrition. Don't just say, hey, I'm losing fat forever, and then being stuck in the dieting cycle. But of course, if you have any questions or if you want some help, we can always say a coach is like you cannot put a price technically on the value of a coach during this time. But we would love to help you if you're listening to this and you're kind of like, I don't know how to go about this, or just in general, if you have any questions about how to burn belly fat or other kind of fat, please drop them in the comments or hit us up, send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. And Laura, thank you so much for your time. This has been a fun conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this too, and we could have covered a lot more topics on this, but let's leave it at that for now. I look forward to hearing from anybody else who has any questions.
Nice to see you. Talk to you
Good to see you,
soon.
Lisa. Take care of you.
Bye.
See ya.